Hi, movie monkeys. He's trying to hide behind the clapper, but it's not big enough. Dumb start to the video. I am Ryan Ellis. This is my wife, Bev Ellis.
Hi.
Over there's Sam licking himself. You're probably going to hear that maybe through the first part of the podcast. We've been doing podcasts for so long. I call it a podcast. It's a YouTube video, damn it. In fact, this is the 9th one we've done on camera and the 14th one overall that has gone onto YouTube since the beginning of January 2023. What we're going to do today is talk about the movie she just showed you on the clapper and the guy behind us, Martin Sheen in Badlands, Sissy Spacek also in Badlands, Terrence Malick's first film we've ever covered. We're going to first do some corrections to that, and then we're also going to talk about 3 movies we've seen recently, one of which was in the theater, and then we're going to do some more Black History Month recommendations, one apiece, and then we'll wrap. The first, well, actually, I said Woody Harrelson guns down Rodney Dangerfield in Natural Born Killers. So we talked about that movie, of course, in Badlands. Doesn't gun him down. He drowns him in the fish tank, and then he clobbers him on the back of the head with a pipe to make sure he's dead. And then he and Juliette Lewis burn her mother alive after tying her to the bed.
Mm-hmm. So, but they let her little brother go.
Yeah, they kill 2 of the 3 other people in the family, but not the kid. Also, the musical theme in Badlands and in True Romance is indeed a classical piece of music. It is not an original by the composer of Badlands. In fact, the mic will pick it up, and you can see for yourself. Carl Orff, who was born in 1895, I'll let it play for a second, and Gunhild Keatman, so it says Keatman. That's what this song is. So, there you go. That's a correction that's been fixed now. All right, so on to the movie review. Oh, wait, any other thoughts about Badlands before we get going on the reviews of other things?
No, I think I summed them all up in the podcast.
It's a pretty short one. It's only about 40 minutes long. And you'll get that after we finish talking on camera. So the first movie we're going to talk about, I said we saw 3. This one was on demand. We talked about how we couldn't really see it on the big screen other than some crappy VIP theater downtown. And I'm glad that we saw it at home because we could mock it for 2.5 hours. The Lensflarians. The Fabelmans.
I wanted to like it. And there's lots to like about it.
It's not very good. Apart from West Side Story, which is an adaptation of an already famous musical based on an already famous play, I'm not a fan of Tony Kushner. I don't think what he's written, generally speaking, is very good. And of course, Spielberg co-wrote this. They're both nominated for the screenplay. I don't think it's a very good script. Michelle Williams, she's acting. She's not bad, but she's not Oscar-worthy. We'll get to the controversy about some of the actresses who didn't get nominated in our third movie we're going to talk about. That's 2 fingers. Third? I can't say words today.
Thrice.
And Judd Hirsch, even though his religion won't allow it, ate all the ham before Spielberg yelled action. What is he doing in the supporting actor nominations category? What is he doing there?
I think the best actor in the movie is Gabriel LaBelle. What's
the lead? The kid?
Yeah, I think he's wonderful in the movie. One of the highlights of the movie is his performance. I like him a lot.
A drink to whatever his name is.
There's other things to like about the movie. I was a kid who made movies with my friends when I was a teenager, so I really thought those parts were fun and relatable and nostalgic for me. I was trying to think of what it is about newer Spielberg films that don't work for me, and this is a preference because lots of people really love them, but I feel like the failure of these newer movies is that there's no forward momentum in his story. He meanders on B plots that don't pay off, or the way the scenes are paced in these movies include all kinds of redundancies that slow it down. And he's such a wonderful filmmaker, so his movies are always watchable, but I find them really frustrating. And I'm sorry, Kaminsky is cinematographer. Oh my God.
Lens flares and overlit completely all the time.
Like every teenage boy, he has a 2K outside of his bedroom window blaring in at all times, flooding his window with an unnatural-looking light, and that's every room and every scene of this movie.
The second best thing in the entire movie is the last scene with a famous director playing an even more famous director.
Oh, yeah.
Great cameo. And the very best thing about the whole movie, the very best thing, is the very last shot.
Agreed. Yeah. Was very, very charmed by the last 5 minutes of the movie. I would never tell anybody not to watch it if they're curious about it, if they're Spielberg fans.
It should not be in any of these categories.
Exactly.
Though.
Yeah, it does not belong at the Oscars
Especially picture,
at all.
probably not director, the actors, no.
It won the Globe.
Yeah, he won the Globe. Spielberg did for directing, and of course the movie did.
Oh my God. When we do our Oscars preview, we're going to talk a lot about campaigning because that's been such a hot button issue, and he's going to come up a lot.
The second movie is Living, which we did see on the big screen. The only way we could see it. It's a remake of Kurosawa's Ikiru, which I remember thinking as one of the underrated Kurosawa films. I saw it a long time ago. I never felt drawn in by Bill Nye's, not Nye's performance, but he's always been good. I don't know why he's nominated. There's 3 people I said today that shouldn't be nominated. Not that it's bad at all. It's very solid. And the screenplay is also up for an Oscar. I don't know what either of them are doing or will be doing at the show.
I love the writer. Like, I love his novels. Ishiguro does not translate to the screen, perhaps. People have made movies out of his books before. You love Remains of the Day, based on an Ishiguro novel. Other adaptations haven't worked as well or haven't been as popular. Maybe his sensibilities just don't translate to the screen that well, but it was just painfully boring.
Very slow. There's some conversations that go on forever, and you think, why are we hearing all this stuff? And also, the movie's only about an hour and 40 minutes long.
Yeah, when an hour and 40-minute movie feels like it drags, that's saying a lot. And the main conflict in the movie, or the main revelation, I don't think it's a secret to say this is a man who finds out he has a terminal illness and starts living his life. But his version of living his life is not what I expected it to be, and actually a bit of a downer. Yeah.
It goes against a credo you've heard many times. Let's just say that without giving away a spoiler.
Yeah, it was just surprising, and maybe they could have made it work, but it didn't feel earned to me.
A drink not to living.
Yeah, I would recommend Fabelmans. I would not recommend Living to anyone.
Okay. Mostly because it was nominated for Oscars and probably shouldn't have been, either of them. The last movie is one that was out for a long time, but we finally saw it on demand. Well, actually, it was free on Crave, so didn't pay a cent for it. But we bring it up because it wasn't nominated for anything. I think it should have been nominated for maybe 3 Oscars, but not the one, although I would have been fine if it was, not the one everyone was so mad about, I guess last month or the last few weeks, Viola Davis and The Woman King. If she was nominated, I'd been fine with that. But Lashana Lynch, who plays her subordinate, whatever you want to call it, her friend in the movie, for supporting actress, the costumes and the cinematography, they were more robbed than Viola Davis was. Mm-hmm. The movie's not great. It's a 2.5 to 3 star, it's okay movie. The stunts are phenomenal.
Very
we were saying
fun.
John Wick-esque in some ways inspired stunts. And the movie's rock solid. It's not bad at all. But I think the bigger omissions were just like Till, the costumes, the cinematography especially, and then a supporting actress more than the lead actress.
Till is another movie really made in the classic Hollywood tradition. Even though it's a movie that is taking really fresh subject matter for a Hollywood film. You've never seen a movie like this before. You've never seen a movie that takes place in Africa, an African kingdom, with a bunch of women soldiers, a culture that none of us are familiar with, something we're not accustomed to seeing, which is just a group of women. I mean, the movie's really all about women, which I found really refreshing to watch. And it was very fun to watch these badass women just absolutely slaughter slavers. If you like seeing that, oh my God, I cannot recommend this movie enough. It is cathartic.
There's a movie called Women Talking, nominated for Best Picture and for Sarah Polley's screenplay. Well, we can call this one Woman Fighting.
Yeah.
Woman Brawling.
Yeah. I think of the 3 movies that we saw, this is the one I'd be most likely to recommend to just about anybody. You will be entertained. You will enjoy it. I don't think it should have been nominated for Best Picture. And I'm like you, Viola Davis, yeah, she was very good, just like she's always very good, but it didn't stand out enough to me to feel like she was snubbed.
Mm-hmm. And unlike what I'm doing right now, wearing a plain black t-shirt, which is in honor of this guy, although I think he's wearing white there, right? But anyway, he would wear white or black. I don't have a white t-shirt anymore. The movie's very colorful, though, unlike this shirt. But speaking of Black History Month, we've been recommending movies for Black History Month for the last, I guess it's all 4 of the weeks we've done an episode. And I'm picking Menace to Society for my last recommendation. Albert and Alan Hughes, it was their first movie. They made From Hell and a few other things. I forget what all they made now. The movie's mean, it's brutal, the main characters are bad mofos, and it makes Boys in the Hood seem like a fantasy in comparison because it's brutal too, but Menace to Society is way tougher, including, I think, the 2 main characters. I haven't seen in a long time. I don't want to talk out of my ass here, but I think they're in some ways the villains in their own movie, the people we follow the most. And it did pretty well at the box office considering this tough subject matter without any real stars, at least in the 2 main roles. 30 years ago, the movie came out in 1993. So Menace to Society.
So I'm going to recommend Tangerine, which is Sean Baker's first film. Now, he's a white filmmaker, but the 2 subjects of the film are 2 trans black women who are prostitutes. He cast actual trans women to play the parts. And it is fun. It's really funny. It is highly entertaining. It will surprise you. I think many people would assume that the subject matter is kind of bleak, but it's not. It feels alive, and it lets you into a world that you likely don't know anything about, and it feels authentic and deeply human, and I love it with my whole heart, and I highly recommend it.
It was on Netflix at one point. I don't know if it is anymore.
It was on Canopy for a long time,
Right.
too.
That's, by the way, no, Menace to Society is not on Canopy, but it is on Prime. You have to pay for it. So that's it for Black History Month and the recommendations. Menace to Society and Tangerine wraps that up. We should have done actual proper reviews, but at least we recommended 8 movies in 4 weeks. So thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe and share and whatever you do for YouTube stuff. Help us grow the show at HYES Ellis. You probably know that if you found this in the first place. What we're going to do now is air that podcast of Badlands, all 40-ish minutes of it that you heard online maybe. It's the same thing at this point, but you didn't get this stuff on your podcast app, the video of us on camera. See you next week when it's Oscars month, and we've got our 8th annual Oscars preview show on March the 6th. And it's so early in the month because the show itself is on March the 12th. And we're probably going to do an Oscars post-view show on March 13th. We'll see, probably. We've done one for many years in a row. Last thoughts? Just saying goodbye?
Don't put me on the spot.
You can always just say, bye-bye, Badlands, now. Not everybody likes being on the road. Not everybody would want to spend a lot of time on the road with a minor. And not everybody would want to start killing people while on the road with a minor. Not everybody drinks coffee either, but I think there are a lot more people who do that than who act like Kit does in Badlands. And if I'm wrong, then there's no future for our culture. And maybe Kit would have been a less violent man if he had a chance to order from Sparkplug Coffee. But they didn't exist back when this movie is set. In the here and now, I can tell you that they've got fairly traded premium Arabica beans that happen to be the freshest in the Great White North. Kit could have had decaf or half calf. He could have enjoyed many different blends and roasts, not to mention a rotating seasonal blend. Sure, he's an American, but the Canadian company that is Sparkplug Coffee delivers to the United States too. Those Yanks and us Canucks always get our orders in a week or less, and we Canadians get free shipping. He might kill me if I call him a Yank. I hope the fact that Kit, where he's still alive today, has to pay for it to be delivered wouldn't set him off, because it doesn't take much to set him off. But perhaps Kit's biggest problem is that he didn't have a sense of belonging. He needed to be a member of Sparkplug's Autopilot Coffee Club. Now keep this straight. This isn't a Coffee of the Month club, people. You can cancel any time or even just pause your membership for a while. But if you are a member, you'll get perks and deals that the once-in-a-while customer doesn't, and you'll save money on every single order. Sparkplug.coffee/HYES is your destination. Using our HYES promo code for Have You Ever Seen will save you 20% on your very next order. So make that happen before you even contemplate a road trip to the middle of nowhere with a low-energy maniac. Now it's time to stop referring to events in this film and start discussing the film itself. Andrew Luther, please cue up that theme song so we can do that.
And action. Have you ever seen
Badlands? Hello, people with buds in your ears, and thank you for downloading or streaming or watching on YouTube, or however you got this, the 495th splash of Have You Ever Seen? We were known as the Top 100 Project for nearly a decade, but as of the beginning of this year, we rebranded. New name, new theme music, new logo, but otherwise, the podcast is pretty much the same. We still dig into the guts of classic films, we still make jokes and exchange barbs, and we still spoil. I'm the calm garbage man who just goes around making people stop breathing, Ryan Ellis. And here's the lady who takes it remarkably well when her boyfriend murders her father, my placid wife, Bev.
That's me.
She really does. You don't get either of them to react to too much of anything, and that will come up in a few minutes during the nutshell. The coming attractions trivia question for Badlands. We have never covered a Terrence Malick film before, but this is partly by request, and Sissy Spacek has only come up once on this channel. For Martin Sheen, this will be film number 4. I thought maybe it was only 1, but it's 4. Well, now it's 4. What are his other 3, and what is Spacek's only film that's been discussed on this channel?
SpaceX is very easy. It's Carrie.
Mm-hmm.
I think I may have a gotcha with Martin Sheen because I counted 4. There's Apocalypse Now, The Dead Zone, The Departed, and Hearts of Darkness.
Oh, I forgot about that one.
The documentary about the making of Apocalypse Now, in which he contributes with interviews.
Wow.
Bam! Oh, this is rare. I have to enjoy this. The rare gotcha.
I guess you're right. I should have said feature film, although I guess that's that too, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Ooh,
feature
I
film
still
that's
gotcha.
not a documentary. All right. It is talking about Apocalypse. I thought maybe he only did Apocalypse Now, and I forgot about The Departed, and I completely forgot about The Dead Zone until I'm scrolling through his long list of accomplishments and see a movie we covered, I think, a couple years ago, The Dead Zone, the horror film by Cronenberg.
Lest you consider me smarter than I actually am, I had a lot of help from IMDb here, because I certainly would have forgotten about Dead Zone.
I use IMDb all the time. And you know what, Bev? The ice is gonna break! Okay, Badlands.
The Dead Zone impersonation. An indulgent Christopher Walken impersonation.
Badlands was released by Warner Brothers in March 1974, but it was shown at the New York Film Festival in October 1973, so we're counting this as a 50 years ago motion picture. Not that anyone other than me likely cares either way, but you all know that I'm pedantic about these things. In this case, I'm going with the film festival. Well, Bev, the movie is 50 or 49 years old, so please remind all the people what it's about and give them the skinny on Badlands.
Martin Sheen and Sissy Spacek are Kit and Holly, a young couple in small-town South Dakota in the 50s. Holly's dad doesn't approve of Kit, so Kit kills him, and the two go on the run together. Heading west, they leave a trail of bodies behind them. Bounty hunters, disloyal friends about to turn them in, and innocent people in the wrong place at the wrong time. The law finally catches up to them in the Badlands of Montana, where they surrender, putting an end to their adventure.
Or, in a nutshell, Badlands is a very interesting movie about very boring people.
Truly.
It's well done, and it's intentional, obviously, but Kit and Holly are so dull. What's he say to her early on? I've got so much to say, or something like that.
He says, I want to go on a walk with you. And she's like, what for? And he says, well, I have a lot of things I want to say to you. And then hard cut to their walk, and he's talking about absolutely nothing.
Do you like stuff?
Basically, every word that comes out of their mouths is meaningless and asinine. But that's completely the point.
Yes.
That they're not Bonnie and Clyde. They're not anti-heroes. They're not heroes at all. Not for 1 second do we support them as a couple. Do we support them on the lam? Do we support their murder spree compared to a lot of other movies? You're right, it is his murder spree. But compared to a lot of other movies about couples on murder sprees, the two very obvious examples that come to mind are Bonnie and Clyde and another movie that supposedly is based loosely on the same killing spree that inspired Badlands, Natural Born Killers. Yeah. In both these cases, those killers are very charismatic. They're our heroes. We kind of understand why they did what they did. Not so with Kit and Holly.
And Natural Born Killers is not one of my favorites for many reasons. I didn't love the movie that much, but it's got so much energy. Woody Harrelson and Juliette Lewis are both terrific. And True Romance also can be compared to this. Not so much for the storyline, but the music that's used in both movies, that marimba thing, that doom diddle doom doom diddle doom. That's American Beauty, but same basic idea. That I guess maybe that movie might be referring to this one as well. And then Patricia Arquette in True Romance sounds a lot like Sissy Spacek does in this film. So she must have been doing an homage, because Arquette does not have an accent like she does in that movie. She was putting on an accent, obviously, and I think maybe homaging this.
You're probably right. I mean, that movie has some clear homages to Badlands. It was a pretty influential film, even though I don't think anybody ever matched it. Nobody's ever done anything that replicates it. But I did think of one other example.
Replicates True Romance or Badlands?
Badlands.
Okay.
Oh, there's plenty of good replications of True Romance. Great movie, but could hardly be called a really unique film. It's not your typical Hollywood fare, but it's also hardly one of a kind. But I thought of one more spree movie that also stars Juliette Lewis as the teenage girl that gets caught up with a spree killer, and that's California.
Yeah, with Brad Pitt. Same year as True Romance, and the year before Natural Born Killers.
Yeah, tight cast. Mm-hmm. And I think that's also based on the same murder spree. All these movies and properties were inspired by this killing spree by Charles Starkweather and his 14, actually I think she may have been 13-year-old
She's 15
girlfriend.
In this, but okay.
She was 13 when she met him, 14 when they took off on the run. Carol Ann Fugit. Lots of similarities. They met when he was 19, she was 13. He was a garbage collector. He killed her family, which wasn't just her father. It was her mother, her stepfather, and her baby sister. Then they went on the run from Nebraska into Wyoming in the late 50s. Massive story at the time, on par with the Lindbergh kidnapping or Bonnie and Clyde. They also trapped a young couple in the storm cellar. They also invaded the home of a wealthy family. There was a huge manhunt, and they did these house-to-house searches. People started locking their doors and loading their guns, worried that they might be next. And near the end, when the police were closing in, Carol turned herself in, and Charles tried to run on his own but didn't get far, just like in Badlands. And Charles was executed, although unlike Badlands, Carol did serve time. She served 17 years in prison, which would have made her in her very early 30s when she got out still.
Whole life to live.
Yeah, but the line in the movie where Holly calls Kit the most trigger-happy person she's ever seen was pulled directly from the trial transcripts where Charles was trying to pin some of the murders on Carol. She says she never killed anybody, but he tried to make it seem like she killed a few people who died on their spree. And he said that Carol was the most trigger-happy person he'd ever seen. And that line's pulled and directly put in the movie.
Yeah. I never get to go on sprees anymore. I have another nutshell, by the way. You kill your daughter's dog, and somebody kills you.
You kill a dog, you deserve to die.
Warren
I don't
Oates,
feel bad.
as the father, does kill the dog as punishment for being with Kid, I guess. So yes, that's why he dies. That's
and perhaps one of the first moments where we really see that something is weird about her, because she has no emotional reaction, both in the visual scene where we watch him kill her dog. She doesn't seem to react at all. He looks back at her like waiting for her to freak out and cry and beg him to stop, and she never does anything.
That's probably why he's doing it. Probably as a bluff. Okay, then don't be around that guy. Okay, fine, Daddy, I won't. But she doesn't do what he wants.
Yeah, and then he can hold the threat of her dog's life over her head, but she calls his bluff, so he has to do it. But even in the voiceover, her dispassionate voiceover that's written kind of like a romance novel, but she reads it like she's a kid reciting a book report, which is obviously intentional. She's a great actress. This was all part of the artistry of the film. This is the decision that the director, Terrence Malick, made.
She was 23, by the way, so she was still pretty young.
Yeah, she passes for so young. When they said she was 15
She's
in the
15,
movie,
he's 25.
I was like, oh, she must have been really young when they shot this, because she still looks like she could pass for 15.
Sheen's 32, and she's 23. They're playing 25 and 15, and you said the ages of the actual people. Okay, the Rotten Tomatoes numbers on this movie are great. 97% of critics like the film. 8.9 out of 10 is the average. There are 59 reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, and 90% of audiences. It was inducted into the National Film Registry in 1993, so only, 4 years into when they started doing that? We've covered 11 other movies that went in that year, so almost half of them, because it's always 25. A Night at the Opera, An American in Paris, Blade Runner, His Girl Friday, It Happened One Night, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Shane, Sweet Smell of Success, The Godfather Part 2, Touch of Evil, and Yankee Doodle Dandy. Most of those are AFI movies we've covered in the past, but not all.
Some good company there.
Mm-hmm. This was nominated for the top 100 passions on the AFI list, which fits because, well, what we're doing this month at least with Crazy Stupid Love Month. This is the last movie of the month, incidentally. It was also nominated for the top 50 villains. Kit, obviously. Maybe her dad with the dog. And the 1998 and 2007 AFI Top 100s. But Malick had no films that made that list. This is probably the most likely candidate that would have. I think Days of Heaven was probably nominated for one or both of those as well. We thought about covering that this year, maybe later in the year, but then this was on TCM. It seemed to fit into the theme of this month. This is a weird love story, but it is a love story. You'd never seen it before, though, right?
No.
And I had only seen it once a long time ago. What'd you think?
It's like a work of art. It's surprising, and it's brave, and so thought-provoking. I just loved it. I've been thinking about it so much since we saw it. The best compliment I can pay any movie.
It's been about a week since we did see it, so things may not be fully crystal clear, but glad you liked it. I don't think I love anything Malick has done. I flat out disliked a few things, although I think every single time, this is fair to say, the artistry, the look of the movie. Sometimes he thinks just like, Gus Van Sant, who's a better filmmaker in general, or a filmmaker I enjoy more generally. But they both love to just show clouds, or leaves, or ants walking on leaves, or raindrops. But especially Malick will do that. And that's fine, but it gets to be a little bit annoying when that's what your movie really is. I think The Thin Red Line is the movie I might want to come back to the most. I remember the acting in that being pretty great. It was so intense. And of course, it looked great.
I don't love Malick either. I actively dislike Tree of Life. But like you
That's
said,
right. Wasn't a fan of that either.
I watch it. There's plenty to like about it. Something about it got under my skin. And of course, it stars Sean Penn, who I very aggressively dislike. I don't know if I've ever actually made it all the way through The Thin Red Line. I know I've made more than one attempt, but I don't remember if I've ever made it to the ending of it. I just never could get into it.
I don't love the Adrian Brody, I think it's him, scenes, or is it Ben Chaplin maybe? Where they're sitting around talking about life. Not to say that no grunt could be philosophical and intelligent, but it seems like he's saying, these guys are thinking about, they're probably not. They're probably 18 or 20 years old, and they're just thinking about surviving, A, who they're going to get with when they get home, B, what job they might have, those kinds of things. Not everyone's the same. I know I'm the first person to say that people are all different. But he tried to make it seem like everyone's just ruminating like I am, Terrence Malick, a middle-aged man at this point in my life. But I do remember the sequences with Woody Harrelson and with especially Elias Koteas and Nick Nolte being powerful and awesome. And that's what I remember the most. He cast a lot of big stars that are barely in it. Clooney and Travolta and a bunch of other people have a few minutes at most, if not seconds, of screen time. And I think a lot of other people were cut out. And then I don't love the ruminating on things stuff and that so much. But, like I just said, I really enjoy the war stuff with those guys, Koteas, Nolte, and I think Harrelson's a big part of that.
Did you know that Terrence Malick, before he was a filmmaker, was a philosophy professor at MIT?
That makes sense.
The ruminating, you're like, who would do that? Well, he would certainly do that. He had this career before he was a filmmaker, and it obviously comes through in his films. He's a deep thinker, and maybe he just assumes that everybody thinks like that, or maybe he just wants to make movies about people who think like that, whether those people happen to be soldiers or criminals, although I don't think that Kit and Holly are doing any deep thinking. I think quite the opposite.
He was born in 1943, by the way, so he wasn't very old when he started his film career.
Oh, he's like our parents' age.
So this does start in Fort Dupree, South Dakota. Kit's a garbage man. Holly's just on her front lawn when he sees her. Father's a sign painter, and Holly's mother's been dead for a long time. We don't really know why Kit's drawn to her, but he is. They don't have sex at first. They do see each other a few times, go on these walks where really nothing is said. But then eventually they obviously do get with it. I think it's after he's killed her father. No, probably before, right?
It's before.
Okay. And then the father is killed because he just simply protests, you're not taking my daughter out of here, but in his calm, detached way. This is not a slag on Martin Sheen for the way he plays it, but he never gets worked up. He does slightly get more intense and upset when she wants to leave him towards the end of the film. But when the father objects to Holly going off with him, think of Natural Born Killers. Even though it's an awful scene with what's being said, Rodney Dangerfield is awesomely great. This comedian who was so likable and everything, but playing this savage father of Juliette Lewis. And then what happens in that? Well, Woody Harrelson guns him down and takes her off. And because it's Oliver Stone, that movie's way over the top with how he does it. In this, Kit just kills the father. She doesn't react. He drags the father's corpse into the basement. He records a suicide note and a confession, and then they pretend that they burned up, and they drive off. Obviously, no one buys that they're actually there in the house somewhere. The father's body would have burned up with everything else. So considering Natural Born Killers and so many other movies where violence happens in a family or a father objects to what a boyfriend or husband's doing and then they fight or they kill each other, what have you. We've seen these kinds of scenes in so many different types of movies. Probably never done quite like this before. What'd you think of it?
Well, it's not just Kit and Holly who are laconic. It's the people getting shot and killed. Her father seems to just take it on the chin and quietly die without much protest. Same later when they shoot his buddy who took them in and then was going to turn them in.
Slowly dies,
Shoot him in the belly and he has nothing to say about it.
Doesn't scream in pain?
No, he just patiently waits to die. He doesn't seem to have any objections to it. It reminded me a little of 2001, A Space Odyssey, the astronauts, the way that they keep their cool, it's unrealistic and it's uncanny.
Astronauts need to be like that, generally speaking. That does track a little bit more.
Okay, but it feels a little abstract. And it's not just them. The landscape is flat, their performances are flat, her voiceover is flat, and this sounds like a criticism, but it's truly not. It's this borderline disinterest that they have and very outrageous story. It just makes you reconsider the events you're looking at. We're very used to seeing a story like this from the lens of, oh, it's so fun, they're going on an adventure, and yeah, some people have to die, but it's worth it for them to be free and
Bonnie and Clyde.
Get the shackles off. What they're doing is iconic American freedom behavior. We like watching people rob trains. We just like people do whatever they want. Damn the consequences. And this is a movie that's forcing us to challenge that attitude and maybe think a little harder about what the consequences may be as these people die without complaint. It forces you to think about what just happened. None of them really die that quickly. I mean, a couple of them do, but the two characters we care about the most, her father, he dies very slowly. Mm-hmm. I think he has to shoot him multiple times. He stabs him, that's right. It's quite a gruesome scene, and it feels a little realistic. There's something authentic about the intention of that murder and the brutality of that murder that takes you out of any reverie you might be enjoying, because violence can be fun to watch in a movie. And this isn't punishing us for enjoying the violence. It's not like a movie that's just tisking us and trying to make us think harder about. No, it's just presenting it with no emotion, which then forces us to look at it for what it is. I don't know if I truly understand it yet. I might need to watch it a few more times. Even reading about it, I found it hard to wrap my head around what it is about it that makes it so special, what it is about it that made me feel things, man.
I think you've hit on why.
I
Maybe
hope
because
so.
we've, especially you, had seen these other movies we've already mentioned a few times. Then Cold Blood is another one we could think about here.
Oh, great movie.
Which came out the same year as Bonnie and Clyde. Not the same themes, but then again, the two guys, they only kill one family, only. They don't go on a spree. They never get to go on sprees anymore either.
Great example of a movie
More detached
about
also.
spree killers, but they are very much not the hero. The difference between that movie and this one is Badlands is so aggressively in Kit and Holly's perspective. We never see anyone else's perspective. There's like a brief montage where she talks about the public's reaction, but it looks like you're watching a newsreel. You kind of think that she caught on television a newsreel about their killing spree and how everybody in the town was reacting. They were worried that they would be next. It's still her perspective of how their actions affected everybody. The incredible scene where they are in the cabin in the woods when they first run away and they just go to live this pastoral life, living off the land, being free. What an interesting concept to just even insert that in the movie and have them enjoy this little reprieve before they have to go on the run. We learn later that there's all kinds of things going on in town. There are people looking for them. They are famous for their crimes, but they don't know. They're just living in this really secular world. I think she even says something about how the world had become this other place, like a planet that she could visit, but that she no longer belongs to.
You keep saying they, but it's him.
But it's truly her perspective. The whole film's from her perspective.
Yeah, but she's A, a minor, and B, the movie shows she's not doing anything wrong. She just goes with him. And she does, by the way, react. I forgot, it's in my notes here. She slaps him after he kills Dad.
That's right.
So that's the one time through most of the movie that either of them react to anything with any kind of upsetness.
You think she would be scared of him at some point, but never is she afraid of him. She loves him, but the way she talks about love is kind of like how she read about love in a book. And I mean like a dramatic romance novel. They're in love with each other, but they seem to be like two kids playing house sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. Well, he's a grown man because he's 25, but he's still pretty young.
He's very immature. Their age difference is completely despicable, and it's part of the crime, too, that he corrupted this child, essentially. Her culpability is that at any time she could have taken off, she could have gotten free, she could have turned him in, but she wanted to be with him. As she says at some point, I saw that my fate was wrapped up in his fate and made the decision.
So then, Goodfellas also. I should have gotten out of there the moment my boyfriend handed me a gun, but I didn't. The truth is I was still very attracted to him.
Thought it was kind of sexy.
Or no, she was still very attracted when he cheats. Anyway, yeah, she didn't really want to bail on Henry many times over because she wants him. And then later on, when she finds out what she's in for when they're married, she wants this life because she wants that money and everything that comes with it. Not quite the same thing, but it's funny to watch a movie like this and it makes you think of 100 others that aren't even necessarily connected, but in that way, Badlands and Goodfellas are. The father and Cato, the friend, who both die slowly and really don't react to it, but that's part of the theme. But beyond them, the thing I remember the most is the couple that gets put in that storm cellar, if you want to call it that. So not the cellar of a house, but it's off separate.
Yeah, truly wrong place, wrong time.
Totally
Totally
they go to
innocent.
visit Cato, and then Cato's already been killed by Kit. So he makes them go down to the cellar, locks it up, says something about how he's going to just go away, and then I don't know how they get out of there. Maybe no one's going to come along for days, and they starve to death. But anyway, his notion is, okay, we're going to go now, and then instead just bang, bang. What's interesting about that is that Kit doesn't care to check to make sure he got them. And from that angle, who's to say he did? And B, again, because it fits the theme of this movie, we don't know anything happened. We don't hear them make a sound. They certainly don't scream.
Yeah.
So he might have missed it entirely.
Which they would if it was like how normal people would react. But even in just the language of this movie, would they scream? No one else is screaming when they get shot.
Yeah, so even just shooting a gun anywhere near them should have made them react. But they didn't. That was a fascinating one. So that one really sticks in my mind. Who's ever going to think to find them? I guess when somebody comes to Cato's place and finds him, they might investigate the entire property. But they're off 100 feet away from the house, so their bodies may lay down there for quite a while without being found. If he got them at all, if he did shoot them. But they're going to die in some way probably because they don't have any food or water down there either. Or if they do, it's not enough to last for a long time, I wouldn't think.
It's like a game to him. I don't even know if I got them. Isn't that crazy? And then he likes not knowing their fate.
Yeah. They also con their way into a rich man's house. Well, again, Kit does that, really, and she goes with him. And he itemizes what he's going to borrow, quote-unquote. But he doesn't kill them.
I know.
He locks the rich guy and his deaf maid in a closet, and then it isn't implied that he goes back and kills them when she doesn't see it. Although I guess you could argue, if this is from her point of view, that maybe he did. But it's not part of the story we see, so logically speaking, he lets them live. Although, are they going to live in that closet for very long if nobody comes to help?
I guess this isn't really true of the couple. What's the saying? To a man with a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. He's a man with a gun, and every problem looks like a bullseye.
But then why not kill the rich guy?
Because the rich guy cooperated completely. Him and his maid just did everything he said and said all the right things.
Sort of the couple that went down in the cellar.
Yeah, that's why I say, well, it doesn't really apply to them. I mean, he's letting them live, but then just for fun shoots. Like she says, he's the most trigger-happy person she's ever met, but he lets the rich guy live. Mm. He knows there's no sense in killing him as in, oh no, we have to kill all the witnesses. If they found them dead, everybody would already assume it was Kit who killed them. You don't need to kill them to eliminate witnesses.
We need proof, and that would be proof. You can't put somebody in jail because you think he killed somebody.
Yeah, but they already have him on so many other murder counts. Anyway.
Well, that's true. So the movie, of course, Badlands, I always think of that as the North Dakota area, which is where this is partially set, but apparently it was shot in Colorado. I think entirely. According to the IMDb, that's the only
the Badlands are in Montana.
They're supposed to be in Montana. There's some outstanding shots, some of the best ones in the whole film. And
oh, no, they shot it all in Colorado. I'm just saying in the movie.
In the storyline, yeah.
Yeah.
But they're in multiple states, obviously. They're heading for Saskatchewan at the end.
That's right.
Coming to Canada. But then they don't make it. But I guess it was all in Colorado. And I thought maybe this is just a cheap place to shoot, although Colorado, I don't think of that as a place to shoot a movie, generally speaking, for budgetary reasons. But the Badlands do stretch down as far as Colorado, so that's accurate. It's not even inaccurate to say it's the Badlands. Some movies have said they're this location, but they're actually another location entirely, another country or a different part of America. So often, of course, Southern California stood in for everything. Mm-hmm. But here you actually are in the Badlands, just not where I thought they were, which was only entirely the North, Montana, Dakota, all that. It does stretch through multiple states.
And boy, does this movie just make them look so beautiful.
Oh, yeah. He had an eye from the beginning. He was an artist from the very first film.
Yeah, and he loves his landscapes. He loves the outdoors. He loves shooting at magic hour.
That's true, too. Days of Heaven is not entirely probably, but largely magic hour. That movie, I think, won the Oscar for cinematography, and it's one of those you think, if there's ever a top 10, like you do top 10 greatest baseball players of all time, top 10 good-looking movies, Days of Heaven might make it. And that's really saying something, because Martin Sheen, the next year, was in one of my favorite looking movies, Apocalypse Now. That, to me, would be on the short list, too. Martin Sheen, also in that film, for the most part, is very detached. Look when he kills the surviving Vietnamese girl after the massacre on the sampan. Hey, get out of there. You know, like, bang! And then everyone freaks out. I told you not to stop. Let's go. Because he's on his mission to try to get to Kurtz. He's probably a little bit more passionate in that movie at different times, especially towards the end when he finally gets to where Kurtz is, cries and such. But for the most part of that movie, he's also very detached. And we see why more so in that than we do in this.
Maybe it was typecasting at that point. We see that all the time.
Well, it could be also his character's a war veteran from the Korean War.
Which makes sense that he would be detached.
Yeah.
Although, of course, the movie opens with him having an absolute mental breakdown in his hotel room.
Apocalypse Now, yes.
Yeah.
They also, well, he does at least, buries useless stuff in the ground, almost like a time capsule. Wonder if he was planning to ever go back there had he not been caught. That was also one of those scenes you wonder why this is actually in the movie, but it does add some flavor.
Again, childlike behavior and a bit of magical thinking.
But after it's been a while, she's growing disillusioned. They do dance in a field at night, another beautiful shot. But she doesn't want to stay with him anymore. That's when he finally freaks out, at least a little bit, and the chase is on. The cops see him while he's gassing up. There's a car chase. He preens in the mirror during the car chase. That's an interesting touch, too, just to show his vanity. Of course, they do mention James Dean, and he does have a James Dean look.
That's the payoff. All throughout the movie, they keep talking about his resemblance to James Dean. And Martin Sheen, with his hair like that, the tight t-shirt and jeans, he does look like James Dean. And that's what attracts her to him in the first place. That's part of the reason why the newspapers are so interested in him as a spree killer. And that is why, at the end, all the cops ought to be brutal with him. They ought to hate him.
He's not black.
Obviously, him being white is one thing, but he's a celebrity and he's handsome. He looks like James Dean.
He does surrender,
right away.
Too.
Come on, they treat him like he's standing above them all. He's standing on that plane, the ladder to get into the plane or whatever, but he's elevated above the cops and they're all staring at him with some kind of reverence because they kind of worship his celebrity and he's tossing them his lighter or whatever, souvenirs for them to keep. Hey, then you can remember you caught Kit. I can't remember his last name. Carruthers. A little souvenir, and he knows he's going to the gas chamber. The actual killer, Starkweather, was killed in the electric chair. So he knows he's going to be executed, and he takes it in stride.
Well, he can't fight it now.
James Dean is an incredibly American figure of rebellion and teenagehood, youthful rebellion.
What's funny about that, though, too, is that James Dean's style was so cool, in addition to what you just said. But when you know more about him, that TV movie that James Franco was in, for one thing, he was so tortured. The actual guy wasn't cool. He wore dorky glasses when he wasn't working.
But the image is
I'm not
all
criticizing
that
James Dean for these things. It's just that his image was not really what he was.
Well, it's the same as Marilyn Monroe was Norma Jean. Of course, it's truly the image that matters, and that's the image that gets him good treatment by the cops. It's the image that gets him Holly in the first place.
The celebrity's a big part of that. I think that's also in Natural Born Killers, that they're celebrities.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, that's a huge part of Natural Born Killers.
So he rides in a plane to South Dakota to go back to be killed, and I wondered if it's his only plane ride. Well, then again, no, because he went to Korea, so the odds are pretty good he was in a helicopter or a plane or something going there when he was over there, what have you. So actually, yeah, maybe. But his only probably commercial plane ride.
But speaking of them being rubes, Hicks, where's Cheyenne?
Wyoming.
They're in Wyoming, and she says she can see the city lights of Cheyenne and talks about how it's the most glamorous, cosmopolitan place she's ever seen. I don't know what Cheyenne's like.
It's not glamorous and cosmopolitan. Right. Probably for Wyoming.
Well, that's just it for Wyoming. No shade on Cheyenne, but it speaks so much about just how unworldly she is. Yeah. And how little of the world she's seen and known.
Kid even falls asleep while he's being sentenced. Just maybe a little bit too much. And
then Holly marries her defense attorney's son. Because in the movie version, she gets off with probation.
Yes, and he got the chair 6 months later. And then, of course, he dies, and the movie's over. And by Malick standards, this is a live-action short.
Oh, my God.
An hour and a half-ish long, and almost everything else he's ever made, if not everything else he's ever made. Maybe not Days of Heaven, is way past 2 hours, probably 2.5 or even more, that I'm aware of. Maybe he's actually made more movies in recent years than he ever had before, because he'd only ever made 3.
Nobody sees them. It's crazy.
Meaning nobody bothers to go to see them.
Yeah,
they can.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, right. He's made some movies like To the Wonder that 8 people saw. I think I did when it was on video, but I didn't see it in the theater. I saw Tree Life in the theater. And that might be it. No, The New World, which I didn't like very much, but what a beautiful looking movie, at least.
Knight of Cups and Song to Song, and the one that you just mentioned.
To the Wonder.
To the Wonder, I don't think they
were all in the past decade, but he'd only made 3 movies in 25 years. Badlands, Days of Heaven, which was about 4 or 5 years after this, and then Thin Red Line, which was 20 years after that.
Yeah, famously.
So since Thin Red Line, he's made, by his standards, a prolific amount of movies.
Well, it's gotten easier to make a Terrence Malick movie because he just puts a steady cam with a wide lens on it. Somebody gets him to circle his actors during magic hour.
Yeah, yes. So Martin Sheen, we talked about the 3 movies that we've covered. Okay, 4, Hearts of Darkness, I forgot about that. Maybe in some ways he's best known for The West Wing, especially maybe to modern-ish people, although he's been in so many good movies, and he's been good in a lot of them. And I mentioned how sedate he is in this and in Apocalypse Now, but then the other 2 movies that we covered him in, okay, Hearts of Darkness, but that addresses Apocalypse Now. So The Dead Zone and The Departed, but more so The Dead Zone, it's the opposite. He's the histrionic actor that you would have seen in Natural Born Killers, for example. He's over the top by his standards. Not even a great performance because we're used to him being more like this, more calm and rational. Spacek, we talked about Carrie, where she was nominated for an Oscar. What a great horror performance that is. She won the Oscar for Coal Miner's Daughter 4 years after Carrie, and then she was awesome and probably should have won again for In the Bedroom. Warren Oates, who does play Father, the sign painter, was in The Heat of the Night and The Wild Bunch, 2 movies we covered a long time ago because they were AFI films. The Friend, Cato, Ramon Bieri. He was in Sorcerer, an underrated William Friedkin film from the later 70s that's a remake of a movie we covered, Wages of Fear, which is better, and a great foreign film. Clouseau, I think is his name, who directed the French version. But Sorcerer, the Friedkin remake, is pretty great too. And also Reds, the Warren Beatty epic. John Carter, he is the rich man, that's his credit. He was in Scarface, but also did the Andromeda Strain with Bieri, so the guy who plays Cato. And the other 2 actors I want to mention are Emilio Estevez and Charlie Sheen. Martin Sheen's kids. They have cameos under a lamppost. I almost forgot about it. I knew they were supposed to be in the movie. I'd written that down, and then the scene happened. Wait a minute, that's the scene. You can really tell he's Charlie's dad. And I think you said you can really tell he's Emilio's dad.
I think he looks more like Emilio.
They both look so much like him.
Oh, yeah.
And, of course, Martin Sheen's real name is Ramon Estevez. He changed it because he thought he'd be discriminated against for being Hispanic. But Emilio and Renee kept the family name. So Malick, we just said maybe all of his films. He's only made 9 of them, but most of them are in recent history. Days of Heaven, maybe we'll cover that one of these days. He also wrote this and produced it, and he acts in it too. He's the guy who shows up at the door.
Yeah, the actor didn't show up or something, so just at the last minute he filled the role.
In the rich man's house. And his then wife, Jill Jakes, was a co-producer. The movie's 1851. We did see it on TCM. Pretty good looking print, I think. There were 3 cinematographers on this. Tak Fujimoto, who was best known for, well, maybe not best known, but Silence of the Lambs, which was an AFI film, and The Sixth Sense, which was also an AFI film. Stephen Larner, who shot Caddyshack. Chris and I covered that on Square at the Movies. Nothing Like This. And Brian Probin, who shot Poor Cow in the 60s for, who was that, Loach maybe? Ken Loach?
Did you see why he had 3?
No, I meant to look it up and I didn't. I'm guessing maybe they had disagreements and he had to fire them, or it could have been what we talked about on In the Mood for Love when Christopher Doyle had to leave because the shoot went so long. It's not a matter of I'm being fired or I'm quitting. It's I have to go do something else. Well, I got to find somebody else then. Maybe that's what it was with this.
This had like a shoestring budget that he raised on his own. It was not an expensive film to make.
But it probably took a long time to shoot.
But the look is so consistent. And the look is so important. The compositions of the shots, the stark difference between the interiors and the exteriors. It's a gorgeous film, but it's not just pretty for pretty's sake. It's pretty to truly tell a story and get in your head about what it's trying to say about the world. And I think more recent ones
are about being pretty for pretty's sake.
Well, listen, some movies are pretty for pretty's sake, and there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. But this is a film that has true vision.
But a lot of his films, I think, are the other thing.
Oh, I haven't seen his recent films, so I'll take your word for it.
Well, the shoot was from July to October. That's quite a long time for a movie that isn't very long with not that many actors and 2 main people by far. No one's in the movie nearly as much as the 2 of them are. The editors actually, Robert Estrin and Billy Weber. Estrin was the main editor. He also cut The Candidate the year before this. We covered that late last year. Underrated Redford film about politics. And then Billy Weber was uncredited. He also worked on other Malick films in his career. The composer, George Tipton, was Oscar nominated for The Phantom of the Paradise. I think that was the year after this, a movie by De Palma, but mostly did TV. So that score that's used in True Romance, that I always think of True Romance first and foremost, I think it's the exact same music. So either they got that from some classic thing, or that's a George Tipton original. And if it's a George Tipton original, then an Oscar nomination for this score would have been appropriate, but they didn't get anything for the look or for the music. And one more thing about the production, Jack Fisk was a production designer. He worked with Malick quite a lot. He met Sissy Spacek during this. They got married, and they're still married today.
Yeah.
Their daughter, of course, is Skylar Fisk. She's got her own career now. And he was still making movies last I looked. I don't know if he is anymore, but he had a long career being a production designer.
Pretty cool detail.
What happens next? Well, Holly lives a life of quiet desperation, forever remembering that a psycho killer took her camping once.
What becomes of Holly? What kind of life does that woman have?
She marries her defense attorney, right?
I know, but what kind of wife does she make? What kind of mother does she make? She's such a broken human being.
Yeah, she's about 16 maybe when this story ends. Maybe 17. Got her whole life ahead of her, and look what she's already seen. Life couldn't be as, well, interesting is a weird word for this because what they're doing is not that interesting, but memorable compared to what she's going to do the rest of her life, what she did with him for this several months. She'll never forget it. How could she? Okay, then, I guess that's it for Badlands. Fairly short episode, but your last thoughts on a movie you had never seen before. A Terrence Malick film, not your favorite guy, but you like this one, so last thoughts.
Well, if there's any greater compliment to a film than the fact that no one's ever been able to replicate it, it still stands alone as a really unique work of art.
It's such a detached serial killer movie. When you think of the histrionics in some of this movie's progeny, like Natural Born Killers, this one's practically asleep, but it's not dull.
No, it's really engaging.
Factoid there. And Malick was an artist from the start, I would say, and he showed that again in Days of Heaven, and then eventually Thin Red Line and beyond, even if some of those movies aren't that compelling or really all that great. I guess he likes them. Thin Red Line got a lot of nominations at the Oscars that year. Well, since we called this the month of Crazy Stupid Love, I decided to watch Crazy Stupid Love last week. It was on Netflix.
Uh-huh.
I saw it once before in the theater. Meh.
Yeah.
I didn't laugh that much, and the relationship between the son and the babysitter should have troubled us back in 2011. Never mind now. Of course, he is a kid, so slack should be cut. It is fun to see Steve Carell transform into a sex machine with all the chicks, though. That's in Shaft, a sex machine with all the chicks. I don't know if you remember anything about it, if you want to talk about that movie.
All I remember about it is that it was 3 times busier than it needed to be. Economy in storytelling, people. An art that's forgotten.
The way they resolve the relationship with the son and the babysitter, he wants her so badly, and she wants Carell, is pretty unsatisfying. And again, it's not just a matter of our modern eyes saying, how dare you do this? It's so inappropriate. They should have thought of that then. It's not because I'm sad the mom died.
It's because I need love.
Well, this son, much like
You're a psychopath.
The Kid in Love Actually, this son has got some of the same things going on. So that is Crazy Stupid Love Month. We covered, what was it again? Let's look at the calendar. 6 movies. But next month is Oscar month. Our 8th annual Oscars preview will be in 7 days, in fact. We've talked about the Academy Awards quite a bit during our YouTube videos the past several weeks. But now we'll have the chance to spend about an hour combing through all the major nominees and giving our thoughts and theories about who should win the Oscars and who we think will win, and other things we expect to happen during the 95th Academy Awards. The coming attractions opinion question for the 8th annual Oscars preview show. It's what I've been asking for years and years leading into our Oscars show. What do you want to win Best Picture? And bonus question, who do you want to take a poke in the chops after they tell a mediocre joke?
Ooh, think about that one.
Will Smith opened up a whole thing. Who's going to get punched this year? Or slapped?
Ding, ding, ding. All right, so for our answers to that question, check out next week's podcast about the Oscars preview. You obviously already know how to find us, but let me remind you to favorite or subscribe wherever you listen. If you already followed us as the Top 100 Project, nothing will change, including access to our archives of hundreds of episodes that are available for free. We're both on Twitter. I'm at BevEllisEllis, and Ryan is at MovieFiend51. Or you can reach us by email, haveyouverinpodcast@gmail.com. And you can find our podcast plus bonus material on YouTube.
At HYES Ellis is our, I don't know about main page, but that's how you can find us easily enough. And we've done every episode together so far with an extra video. And then everything I've done is just the podcast. So if you heard it online through a podcast app, it's the same thing. But we're hoping YouTube gives us more exposure. That's why we're doing it. And of course, we've had the extra content so far. Every episode. We're recording this one. What is this now? It must be the 9th episode. We've done up to something about Mary. So I guess we're going to keep doing this. I could probably stop saying we're going to keep doing this because we keep doing this.
And lastly, to enjoy freshly roasted premium coffee delivered straight to you in Canada or the US, please go to sparkplug.coffee/HYES and enjoy a 20% discount.
See if I remember how the song goes. Psycho killer, qu'est-ce que c'est? Run, 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 run away. Holly.
And cut.